We end this lecture by looking at the Last Supper, which is obviously one of the most important events recorded in the Bible, but also one that has very strong Jewish overtones. To begin with, the Last Supper was a Passover meal, and Passover is one of the most important holidays in the Jewish calendar, where Jews gather for a special ritual meal where they recount the Exodus story, and in particular there are elements of eating a special kind of bread called matzah, unleavened bread, because when the Jews left slavery in the land of Egypt, they didn't have time to wait for the bread to rise. And we also drink 4 cups of wine to celebrate the joy of freedom and not being slaves in Egypt any longer. And these themes are picked up explicitly in the Last Supper story, where Jesus breaks the bread and divides it among the participants, saying, "Eat, this is my body," and the same thing with the wine, where he passes around the cup and says, "Drink, this is my blood." So these are, of course, the normal rituals that are conducted in a Passover Seder, but they're given new meaning and new life, especially this idea that he is giving up his body and blood for the salvation of others. But even that has an entirely Jewish context that it must be understood in. During Jesus' time, the temple still stood, and so the sacrifices that were made in the temple, as we talked about in a previous lecture, that one transferred one's sins onto some sacrificial animal, brought it to the priest at the temple, who would then sacrifice it on the altar. And so in this way, Jesus is presenting himself as the same kind of a sacrifice, that he will absorb the sins of all of humanity, but as a result he will have to die. He will have to sacrifice himself on the altar so that our sins can be absolved. And in a Christian context, of course, that means, because of the idea of original sin, that we will not be worthy of entering heaven without having our sins first absolved by Jesus. And so Jesus performs this Jewish ritual, but breathes into it some new life and new meaning.